Everybody, and welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be working through a simple robot that uses polygonal primitives only, not modifying the vertices or the faces, not doing any extruding. The only special thing we're going to do is use the bend tool. So here's a picture of the robot we're going to be working with today. I'm going to make some modifications down here to the bottom half of the torso. We're going to use the bend tool for these hands. A cylinder, 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 or that might be it. No, it's a torus. Torus, torus, cube, cylinder, sphere, cylinder, sphere, 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 rectangle, 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 sphere, 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 cube, cylinder, cylinder. So pretty basic. You see, I just want to, if you're doing this, you want to just kind of look for an object or an item or something you can break down into basic shapes. All right, so let's get started. First off, I've already set my project to a new project. I showed that in my last video, but just to show you, it's project window. I clicked on new project, browsed, called it Polygon robot. Okay, now we're ready to go. So first off, I'm going to start with the head. So, all right. So the first thing, the head is a cube. So we're going to start with the cube. We're just going to click and drag, kind of make the footprint here. Actually, that's kind of big. Like that, and then drag the height up. There's our head. I'm going to turn shaded mode, so I'm going to hit 5 so I can see. Okay. Okay. So now, oh, and by the way, I have the image set up on my other monitor. If you want to follow along, maybe just pause the video, open up like a new tab or something, go to the video and pause it right here. Or just find an image and just minimize it and then bring it back up when you need to see it. But anyway, okay, so I'm going to now make the cylinder for the head, and I'm going to go into the side mode for this. Side, seeing spacebar. I'm going to click and drag out. This is making the footprint of the cylinder on the side. And then I'm going to go to my perspective view here and click and drag for the height. And the reason I made it so long is because I'm going to take it and I'm going to move it inside of the cube, so it pokes out on either side. So I only have to make one cylinder. This is something about Maya that is different. I'm going to go to the front view here. Is that two objects can occupy the same space and use it all the time. Some things would be near impossible to do if this wasn't the case. I'm going to move it up a little bit so it's centered in the object more closely. In space, go back to my perspective view. Okay, so I like the way that looks. I'm going to add a few subdivisions into my cylinder. So I'm going to come over here to my channel box, and if your channel box isn't showing, it's this button right here. Just show or hide channel box. I'm going to click on my polycylinder inputs, and I'm going to up my subdivisions on the axis. I don't know, something like 36. Looks good. Okay. So now we need to make a little antenna on top of his head. And that will consist of a sphere, a cylinder, and another sphere on top of that. Okay. So, alright. So I'm going to click off. So I'm sorry. And click and drag. Make my sphere. And I'm going to move it into place. Okay, it's a little high, so I'm going to go to my front view just to place it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm just holding Alt and right click and dragging for zoom. I'm going to move it down so it's about halfway. Move it over so it's roughly centered. Oh, and here's a cool little tip for you. If you, let's see, you select your objects, and then last you select the object you want to align to, and you go to Modify Align Tool. It'll pop up with this little dialog. Hit that, and it will line everything up center. It's similar to the Adobe align tools that are up on the menu bar there. And then I'm just going to hit W to get out of that tool. Okay, I'm going to hit space, go back to perspective mode. Okay, so it's not quite centered this way. So I'm going to go open up my align tool again. And as you can see in perspective, it changes which sides it lets you manipulate as you rotate around it, which is really nice. Align them that way, so now they're all lined up. Okay. Hit W to get out of that. Okay. So now we're going to make the little cylinder that goes in between the sphere and his top sphere on top of his head. So, alright. So take the cylinder tool, and we're just going to click and drag a little cylinder here, and we're going to drag it up, and then bring it over, bring it up. And as you can see, it's not aligned, and it's a little too tall, a little too thick, so I'm going to scale it down. So I'm going to hit R, and then I'm going to click on the middle square here in the middle, and I'll scale it so it keeps its, so it scales all of the directions at once. Keeps its proportions, that's the word. I'm going to go to my front view here. Just going to line it up, kind of. And I should probably use the align tool. So I'm going to select this, then I'm going to shift, select this, modify align tool. I'm going to line it up this way and this way. Okay. So there's our little stem here. Move it down a little bit. It's a little too long for me. Okay. So now we need to make the little ball on the top of his head here. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to make a sphere. I'm going to click and drag. Just making a small little sphere here. Move it up. Move it over. And once again, I need to align it, so I'm going to go modify align tool. I'm going to line it up. This way. Whoops, not that way. This way and this way. Okay, and if you see when I zoomed out, it kind of like tools just start disappearing on me. Yeah, you just zoom in further, and then it'll give you your options to see your tools. It's just a little thing to think about. Okay, so now we got our little antenna thing going on here. This is still a little too long for me, so I'm going to move this down. Then I'm going to take the sphere and I'm going to move that down. Alright, I like the way that looks. Okay, so now we need to do his eyes here, and those are going to be spheres. Going to poke out from his head. Over here, select the sphere tool, just click and drag to the little sphere. Move it over, move it forward so it's poking through. Want it about halfway. Move it up. I'm going to go to the front view so I can kind of place it. I want it a little higher, a little wider. It's kind of that lined up like that. I'm just hitting spacebar to go between my views. And then this is kind of poking out kind of far for me. And I could just move it back further that way, but I want to keep the same size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it in one direction. So I'm going to hit R. I'm going to take this blue scale tool and I'm going to scale it down. So it kind of flattens it out, gives it a more elliptical shape. Okay. And then I need to do his other eye as well. So I'm just going to set my move tool and Command D for duplicate. And then click and drag the other eye that I made over here and go in my front view so I get them placed accurately. And now here I can't really use the align tool because I'm not aligning to the center or to the edges. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of looking over here and I'm looking, okay, so this is just barely touching the sphere, and so I'm going to line this one up so it's about barely touching like that. So here's our robot's eyes. They feel a little far apart for me, so I'm going to move them in a little bit. Scoot it in, just about like that. Scoot it in about the same. About like that. And there's my robot's eyes. Okay, now we need to make his mouth. And that's going to consist of a rectangle that we're going to color black to look like a hole. I'll show you how to make holes later. But for now, we're just going to make a rectangle for his mouth. Okay, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to click the rectangle tool and then our cube tool. I'm going to go to my front view here so I can place it. It's about as wide as his eyes are. Just going to click and drag about like that. And I can align this later, so it's not that big of a deal. Go to my perspective view here and drag out, back so it's sitting inside. Then I'm going to select my overall cube. I'm going to modify Align tool. I'm going to align it so it's centered this way. Okay. So now we got our mouth going on here. So now, I think this is a little wide still. If we go to this view, yeah, it's overshooting the spheres by a little bit, so I'm going to just hit R. I'm going to select the red one, and I'm just going to scale it down a little bit. So it's just kind of lined up with the edge of the sphere there. Spacebar and go back to my perspective view. Alright, so here's the head. The head's pretty much done now. As you can see, we've added the side cylinder elements, we added his top antenna thing, we got his eyes done, and we got his mouth drawn out. Okay, so now we need to work on his neck. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag a marquee around all of him, and I'm going to move him up. So we're going to work on his neck. Okay. Oh, and if you select this and you're trying to move it up and your pieces are moving in different directions, you can come here to your tool settings and click on world orientation instead of object, and then it shouldn't do that. That's just an issue because it moves them all individual to what they are. So if you've rotated stuff, then you might have that problem. Anyway, okay, so we're going to make 2 tori for his neck here. So I'm just going to click on my torus tool. Just going to click and drag. Torus, I'm going to have to scale this down. But I want it fairly even. I want the hole bigger than a donut hole, because I can adjust that later. Come here to my polytorus, smooth it out a little bit. Let's give it some more. Oh, and I'm middle clicking and dragging onto the main window to change the values like that. I'm highlighting the field and then clicking and dragging. Okay, so nice and smooth here. I'm going to scale it down. About like that. I'm going to move it up, and that's not small enough, so I'm going to keep scaling it down. Scale it down. Okay, I'm going to align it to this, so I'm going to shift select that, modify line tool. Click here to align it that way and align it this way as well. So now we have his first neck piece in. Hit W, excuse me. Select the torus, pull it up just a little bit, just so it's barely inside of our other cube. We just don't want an air gap there. Again, I'm just going to duplicate it, so Command D or Control D on a PC, drag it down, and just like that. Okay, so we got his neck things in there. These are still a little big for me, so I'm going to select both of them and hit R, scale them down, and as you see, they're scaling individually because I have object scaling turned on. So I need to back up a little bit. Kind of like that, yeah. I like the way that's looking. Okay. So now we have his neck done. Now we need to start working on his chest here. Shouldn't be too difficult. We're just going to start with a cube, and then we're going to make a series of cubes and spheres for his buttons and screens on his chest. Okay, so I'm going to come here, I'm going to select the cube tool. I'm going to go to my front view to draw the outline. I want it wider than his head. And I'm going to click and drag down. I want it kind of rectangular. Oh, I don't know, something about like that. I'm going to go to the front view, or the perspective view, I mean, and drag out the distance, and I want it wider than his head this way as well. And then I'm just going to kind of move it. I'm going to align it to this. By Align tool, align it this way, and align it this way as well. Okay, so now our chest is lined up with our head. I'm going to move this up a little bit, just like about like that, so it's just touching that torus. So get that connection there with the geometry. Okay. Now we need to make some of the details on his chest here. So let's make the round buttons first. I'm just going to take the sphere tool and I'm just going to click and drag, make a little blue button here. And we'll color these buttons after. And click and drag it down. It's about at the bottom of his torso here, so I'm going to move it in a little bit. Out a little bit. So it's about the same distance between these two edges. So it, it looks even, nice. I'll zoom in here so I can get it about halfway in. And go to the front view just to kind of see how close I am here. Looks pretty good. I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to use the same trick that I used on the eyes. I'm going to scale it in. So just take this and click and drag it in this way. Make it more flat, like that. I'm going to take it and I'm going to duplicate it. So Command D. I'm going to hit W and go to the Move tool, and then drag it over. There's 4 buttons on his chest. So just kind of distribute these out. Command, and then I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to Command D and drag these out. And the reason I did that instead of doing it 4 times is this way it's easier to get the distance the same. I only have to get this and this distance equal instead of getting this, and this distance equal, because this is duplicated that. So it's a little trick. It's little tricks that you learn to help your workflow out. And I like the way that looks. Maybe these two are a little close. Let's select them both. Click them both, and then drag them out a little bit. Just like that. So there's our 4 buttons at the bottom. We need to make his red and yellow buttons here. And I'm just going to duplicate these bottom buttons and just scale them up for here. Duplicating is good because it saves you a lot of time. You don't have to keep remaking things, and it keeps the same size and everything. So move this up. Like that, and I'm going to scale it. Scale it up like this. Oh, it's a little big. Scale it down a little bit. Scoot it down just a tad. I want it closer to the edge than it is to the top. Still a little bit. Mostly equal though. Like that. And then I'm just going to Command D again for my second button here. And then click and drag it down like that. Just kind of give me a little more distance between these two. Just to give me that those buttons right there. Okay, now we need to make his screens. So there's 2 main screens right there. So I'm just going to take the rectangle tool, the cube tool, go into my front view here, zoom out a little bit, pan over. I'm just going to kind of go off this. I'm going to click and drag, go over here, and drag up about like that. Oh, whoops. I didn't want to do that. So I'm going to undo that. Let's do that again. I didn't want to make it that wide. Click and drag. It's about as wide as these buttons are. Drag it up. A little more narrow. I'm going to drag my distance there just so it has some thickness. I'm going to pull it out. Move it up. I'm going to go to my front view to move it up so I can get it kind of aligned with stuff. And it doesn't have to be perfectly aligned at this point. Just trying to get it so it kind of matches everything. Okay. Then I'm going to Command D the screen. I'm going to move it over. Want a decent gap in between them. Then I'm going to scale it down to make the second narrower screen. Like that, move it over. I don't know, about like that. Nothing too fancy here. Oh, and you can turn on wireframe unshaded, so you see how these screens just disappear when I go in the front here, because they're both the same color and they're flat surfaces, and if you kind of want to just get a feel of where stuff is, so you don't have to always be rotating around to see, you can click this little button here, and it'll turn your wireframe on your shaded view. So I can see how far those are apart from each other. And I think this is a little bit wide. And then I'll front view, move it towards the other one a little bit. Kind of want to get this gap on either side of this line even, just for symmetry's sake. Go back here. Okay, so we made his two screens, and we made his 4 buttons on the bottom. We made his 2 buttons on the side. Now we need to make his arm, and we're just gonna make one arm, and then we're gonna duplicate it for the other side. And since these are mostly square, and it'll be a cylinder, and this will be the round part of the cylinder over here, it can switch sides, and we don't have to worry about being right or left-handed. Like, we don't have anything that would differentiate which side of the body it has to be on. Okay, so I'm going to start off by, we're going to go into the side view here, and we're going to take our cylinder, and I'm just going to start here in the middle, and just click and drag an arm. I'm going to go to my perspective view and drag out distance here. I don't know, about like that. It's a little high, so I'm going to scoot it down. It's a little wide, so I'm going to hit the scale tool, and then I'm going to the red one. I'm going to scale it in just a hair. Kind of want it square here, like that. Move it out so we have room for our cuff here, I guess. And I'm just going to take one of his neck ones here, and I'm going to duplicate it. Command D to duplicate. I'm going to drag. I'm going to E to rotate. I'm going to hold down J and then click and rotate so it snaps to 15-degree increments so I can get it exactly 90. Then I'm going to hit W and I'm going to move it down here, and it's about the right size. I notice I haven't aligned this yet with my body, and so it's kind of off, because I know this is aligned with my body. Move it in a little bit. So I'm going to select this and select this. I'm going to align to that. So I'm going to go modify, align tool. I want to align it this way, and I want to align it this way. Okay, W, select this, and then we're going to move it in just a little bit. So it's just so it's touching, kind of like that. Okay, now this needs more subdivisions in it, so I'm going to go click on my cylinder I just made, go over here to my polycylinder 3 inputs, get my subdivisions axis up. Let's do like 40, 44, should be good, just to kind of smooth out the surface there. Give us a more round shoulder. So it's a little thick. I'm going to take my scale tool, I'm going to scale it down a little bit and move it back in place. Okay, so we got his shoulder there. Now we need to make his arm. It's going to come down here, and then we're going to put his claw hand on the end. Okay, so that's going to be a cylinder. So I'm going to click the cylinder tool. I'm going to go to the top view this time, because I want to make sure it fits within his arm. I mean shoulder here. His arm will connect to his shoulder. And I just kind of click and drag. Just I don't want it bigger than it. I'm going to go back to my perspective view. I'm going to drag it down. Goes down about like that. It's just kind of short arms. And I want to move it up, so it looks like it is machined into his arm here. Going to select, shift select his shoulder and align it to that as well. So I'm going to go modify align tool. And we're going to align it this way and this way. Okay, so his arm now is in the middle of his shoulder. Hit W to get out of that. Click my arm. So it's a little rough too, so I'm going to up those subdivisions on that. And something to keep in mind is when I'm adding subdivisions to a cylinder, I try to keep it so I get this nice plus sign of straight edges here. Because that way, if it's divisible by 4, it makes it a lot easier. Like if I'm overhead, all my lines line up, go in this direction. So this is something to keep in mind. What I try to do, I try to keep it divisible by 4, so I'm going to up this to 36. And as you can see, I still have that nice plus sign of straight lines there. Okay, so there's his arm. Okay, so now we need to make his claw hand here. And we're going to use the bend tool. I did a video on the bend tool earlier, but I'll step you through it again here. I'm going to take a cube, and we're going to draw a cube out first. I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to click and drag, make his hand. I don't want it wider than his arm is. I'm not exactly sure how long we need to make it either. So about like that. We're going to drag it. We want some decent thickness. I don't think that's long enough, so I'm going to scale it some. Scale it up like that. And we need to add some divisions in it so it can bend on the divisions. And that would be the width, I believe. Yes. Give it a good number of divisions here, like 15 or so. That'll probably work. I'm going to move it down here. And I'm going to align it to his arm. So I'm going to select his arm, I'm going to modify, align tool, modify it this way, and modify it this way, like that. Okay, I'm going to hit W to get out of that. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go to the animation menu, create deformers, nonlinear, bend. I know it's a lot of menus to remember. But you'll get used to it. Mine is full of them. So click bend. Okay, so it made our little bend handle here. And as you can see, it's oriented incorrectly. It's oriented vertically, and we want to orient it horizontally. So we're going to need to rotate it. So hit E, rotate it. I'm going to hold J, and then click, drag, and rotate it down. So it's like that. So I'm just going to come over to my inputs, going to hit bend 1, and I'm going to change the curvature and see. Okay, so that's working for me. I didn't put enough divisions in. As you can see, it's kind of faceted there. But I like the length, and I like the thickness on my hands. They look good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this. I'm going to go over here to my inputs, and I'm going to change my subdivisions. I'm glad that worked because it would have made me look like a fool otherwise. Let's change it to 20. And, okay. So, let's turn off the wireframe unshaded. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, so something to keep in mind is that if I move this, if I move my claw that I just made independently, it's going to change how it's curving. So I need to move my bend tool with it together. And if you can't see the bend tool, an easy way to do it is you open up your outliner. That's a window outliner right here. If it's not on your shelf, I'd recommend putting it on your shelf though with Control Shift clicking the menu item. Come down here and you see your bend handle. Select both and then just click. See, this is what I was talking about earlier, where it's moving them differently because I rotated my handle and I didn't rotate my cube. So that's not going to work. So what I'm going to have to do, whoops, there we go, is I'm going to group these together. So I'm going to have them both selected and I'm going to hit Command G. It's going to group them together in this group. So now I can still select them individually, but if I select the group, then I can move it. Okay, and see, when you make a group, it defaults the pivot point here. So I could just move it up right here, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Modify, Center Pivot. And I have a tool for that on my shelf too. I use it all the time. It's going to center pivot. It's going to center it in that object. And I'm just going to move it up so it's connected to his wrist there. About like that. I'm going to make it a little wider, and I can scale it this way. If I scale it this way, see, it'll just make his claw tighter. But I'm going to scale it this way, and since it's not bending that way, I can get away with it. It's a little wide. Go down like that. Okay, so there's our nice hand there. So now we're gonna make. I'm actually gonna make this larger. I'm gonna select my group. I'm gonna scale them all together. I'm gonna select the blue one in the middle and just scale it up. This is just so it matches my picture I'm working off a little closer. Make it just larger than the arm there. Move it up so it's inside of it. Yeah, so he has his little beefier hands there. Maybe scale it down just a tad more. And then I'm going to scale it this way. Just to make it so it's not poking through on any of the sides. Okay. So now we have one arm done. We can just duplicate it for the other side. So I'm going to click this, shift click this, and shift click his claw we just made. And I'm going to Command D to duplicate it. Move tool. I'm just going to move it over. And what's nice about this is when you duplicate an object, it makes it so its inputs don't matter anymore. Because I could have, like if I just try moving this, it's going to mess up the curve. But if I duplicate it, the curve, this bend handle here isn't affecting it anymore. And so it comes into existence looking exactly like this. So I don't have any inputs here. So that's something to keep in mind. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It will probably trip you up eventually. It does to everybody. I'm going to duplicate it, his cuff here, and move it over. Zoom in here so I can see what I'm doing. It's too far in. This is just inside. And then I need to move his arm further out. So I'm going to click and drag a marquee. Grab the three objects, and I'm just going to drag it out. About like that. Click off, and okay, so yeah, so we have his arms done now. It's looking pretty good. Pretty happy little robot here. Okay, so now we need to make his. I should probably move all of him up. So I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna click this. I'm gonna come down and shift click here. So it selects everything. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. So I'm going to group it, Command G, group it, move it up, so I can work on the rest of him. Move it up, and then I'm going. Okay. So now we need to make his waist. And I don't want to make his waist like this. I want him to be able to, I just want him to be able to pivot. So he's going to have a torus here, similar to his neck, but a little bigger. And then he's going to have a cube here that's a little narrower than his chest. And then his legs are going to come out of that. His legs will be like his arms, they'll be cylinders. And then I'm just going to make cubes for his feet here. And I'm not going to make them pointy on top like that. Which I could, but for this project, I just want to use primitives without modifying the vertices or anything. So we're just going to make cubes for his feet. So we come over here. Okay, so we need to make his hips, I guess. So I'm going to click the cube tool. I'm going to go into the front, and I'm going to fit. So it'll fit on my anything I have selected, or if I don't have anything selected, it'll fit everything. And I'm just going to click and drag and make a nice little waist here. I'll probably have to make it a little wider. But this is just so I can keep it about proportional. Click and drag. Okay, so I want it a little wider than that, but I don't want it wider than his chest. I want his chest to be the widest part. I feel it's a little tall. Make it a little wider this way. He's going to have long legs. We're going to give him some pretty long legs here. In fact, actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to make a cylinder, so like we did for his arms here. So I'm going to have a big long cylinder here, and then his legs are going to come off like his arms do, so he can walk better. Yeah, sorry, I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here, so I didn't pre-plan any of this out. So I'm going to Command D, cylinder, move it down. I'm going to scale it up. About like that. I'm going to scale it up this way, and then I'm going to make it a little shorter. Scale it up some more, make it shorter. The reason I'm doing this instead of just doing it this way is because then it doesn't scale this direction the same. So I'm scaling it up this way and then scaling down the width. I like that, and I'm going to shift select his chest, align it to that, so modify, align tool. I'm going to want to line it up this way, and I want to line it up this way. It's already lined up. That's good. Okay, so I like that. And we're just going to make a cylinder to go from here to here. We're not going to put rubber things on it. I'm going to make a single cylinder. So that'll be our next step. So I'll come over here and I'll get my cylinder tool. I'm going to go to my top view here. It's going to kind of go in the middle of this and scale up. About the same size as that sphere I'm working off of. And go over here, and we're going to scale it up this way, just to give him something to rotate on, so he can turn his body. I'm going to up the subdivisions of my cylinder I just made, make it 36. About like that. I'm going to align it. So I select my cylinder first, then shift select my body. Modify, align tool, center it, center it. It was pretty close, but it's always good to be exact. Okay, so now we need to make his legs. I'm gonna make the cylinder a little bigger first. And that's a lot about Maya. A lot of the time you'll be spending tweaking what you've already made. It's all about the little details, the little adjustments that make the difference. So you'll be finding yourself going back and retouching up stuff. I'm going to make this a little wider to accommodate both of his legs. And I'm just going to take his center pivot here and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move it down. Because that's about the circumference I want for his legs, and then it's already lined up. Okay, so I need to make his legs longer than that, so I'm going to scale it up like this. I'm going to move it down about like that. Okay. Then I'm going to take and duplicate it. Well, yeah, I'll duplicate it now. I'm going to move it over for his other leg. Kind of get it kind of so they're equal distance here. Just a tad. It's kind of like that, just enough to, just so they're about the same distance here to here and in between here. And then we're going to make him some cube feet. And then we'll get to color him, and then we'll do some rendering. So that'll be fun. Okay, so take the cube here, you can go into the top view by pressing space. And here's his legs. So I want it wider than his legs are, and longer in the front. Like that, like that. Go to perspective view. I'm going to click and drag down. To make him a nice foot here. I think that looks nice. A nice square shoe size, and then we're gonna align it to this. So shift select that, modify, align tool, center it that way. That's the only way I can center it. Then we're gonna take it, I'm gonna duplicate it, move it over, and then shift select this, modify, align tool, center it that way. And I could have done the same thing like I did with the arms, and could have built out the whole arm first and then duplicate all of them, move them over. But I just chose to do it one at a time. So it's just however you want to do it. Okay, so this is our simple little robot here. Now we need to start making some shaders for him. So I'm going to open up my Hypershade window, and I believe I showed this in an earlier video. But if you're new to this, this is where you build out your textures. Move it kind of like this, so I can see both at the same time. I have another monitor, but you guys can't see the other monitor. So, okay. So I am going to make a blend shader. Alright, and this is going to be the red that his top of his head and his hands and his feet are, and that button there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and select those objects. Click, shift, click, shift, click, shift, click, shift, click, and click. And then I'm going to right click on the blend and I'm going to assign material to selection. So now any changes I make to this material will, I'm going to go to the attribute editor, will happen on all the objects that are attached to. So I want to make it red. I'm going to click on my color here and give it red. Okay, it's a little bright, so pull this down a little bit and make it darker. Yeah, like that. So give them nice red color. Okay. So now, so I don't have to come over here and make another blend and then redo the color, I'm just going to select this, go to Edit, Duplicate, Shading Network. So now I have another one. And this one, I'm going to make it yellow. So I'm going to have these yellow eyes, yellow button, and the yellow screen right there. So I'm going to select his eyes, the screen, and the button. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to assign material to selection. I'm going to select this material, I'm going to go to the color, and I'm going to change it to yellow. That's a little bright again, so maybe pull that down just a tad. About like that. Give him, some color, splashy color there. Okay, now we need to make a blue material for his little rubber things here. And I'm going to make that a Lambert. The reason I'm making these different types is they're best used for different things. Blin is most like metal textures. Fong is most like plastic, and then Lambert is for like rubber or painted wood or other matte surfaces. So that's why I'm using different materials, and I probably should have made his screen a Fong, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to make them all. Well, in fact, I could have made the yellow one Fong. Okay, here's a good way to show it. So I don't want this to be a blend anymore. I'm going to select it. I'm going to change the type here in the attribute editor. This little drop down. I'm going to change it to Fong. As you can see, it looks a little more plasticky, and that replaced it, but it kept my color and any other settings that are common between, that you can have common between the two. So, okay, so that's plasticky. So now I need to make a Lambert shader. So I'm going to click here on Lambert, and I'm going to select this, the cuff here, and this, and this, and this. And I'm going to come over here to my Lambert 2, assign material to selection. I'm going to select my Lambert 2, and I'm going to change it to blue. It's a little light. It's a little dark enough, just a tad. Alright, I like the way that looks. So now, his screen on his chest is the same color of blue, but it would be plastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shader, edit, duplicate shading network. I'm going to select the chest. I'm going to apply material to selection. Then I'm going to select this and I'm going to change it to a Fong. So now his chest has a Fong on it, and these are still Lamberts. And I guess these should probably be Fongs as well. So I'm going to select those, right click on the Fong, assign material to selection. So now he has little shiny buttons there. Okay, so we have the majority of his colors done. And it looks like he's made of two different types of metal. He has a light colored metal, kind of like an aluminum, and then he has a darker colored metal too. So we need to make two separate blends that are different shades of gray. Just going to make a blend here. I want this one to be a little darker, like that. And then I'm going to select the dark ones, the dark parts of him. Select his two shoulders, his head, his sphere, and his legs. do that as well. And I'm going to come over here, right click, assign material to selection. So now he has a nice dark metal on that. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to go to edit, duplicate shading network. And I'm going to select the rest of him. Oh, except his mouth. I'm going to make a black one for his mouth. And I'm going to go to edit, right click, assign material to selection. And I'm going to go over here to blend 4. And I'm going to turn up the brightness on it. It's a nice bright metal. Okay, so now all we have left to do is make the black for his mouth. And I'm just going to make that a Lambert. So I'm going to go over here and make a Lambert. Click this, right click, assign material to selection. Select the Lambert, come over here and make it black. The reason I did a Lambert there is because we want to make it look like a hole. So we don't want it to be reflective or shiny right there because it's supposed to be a gap. So there is our little robot. And all colored up, ready to go. In the next video, I'll show you how to do the rendering for him. So, hope to see you guys there.